History remembers the men who faced the gallows. But the women? They were poisoners, plotters, and killers who walked to the scaffold in silk dresses and whispered prayers no one answered. 21 women. 21 final moments. This is Crime Lens. Case 1. Grete Beier. The blade fell at 6:33 in the morning, 3 minutes from cell to coffin. She never screamed. July 23, 1908. Freiburg, Saxony, Germany. By sunrise, dozens of officials would gather in the courtyard to watch a 22-year-old woman lose her head. But the story of Marie Margaret Beier, known to everyone as Greta, began over a year earlier with a kiss and a lie. Greta Byer was the mayor's daughter. Blonde, blue-eyed, educated in the finest schools. She played music, wore light-colored silks, and walked the streets of Brand with a St. Bernard at her side. Everyone saw an angel. Nobody saw the demon underneath. At 17, Greta began a secret affair with a man named Hans Merker. Her father disapproved. He arranged her engagement to Kurt Pressler, a civil engineer with money and prospects. Greta smiled. She accepted the ring, and she began to plan. On May 13, 1907, Greta visited Pressler at his apartment in Chemnitz. She told him to close his eyes and open his mouth. She had a surprise. He thought it was a game. She slipped potassium cyanide into his drink. Then, to be certain, she pressed his own revolver into his open mouth and pulled the trigger. She spent the next hour alone with the body. She forged a suicide note. She forged a will, leaving everything to herself. She stole $500 in cash. Then she walked out. Police ruled it suicide until a letter Greta wrote to Merker surfaced during an unrelated arrest. In it, she hinted at what she had done, which is investigators also discovered she had secretly given birth to 3 children by Merker and disposed of each one. Her trial revealed a woman of chilling composure. She confessed in detail, hoping for mercy. The King of Saxony refused a pardon. On execution morning, a bell rang at 6:30 a.m. Greta walked through flowering gardens toward the guillotine, pale and upright, hands folded, wearing a black dress with the neck exposed, and a 5th step had been added to the platform. She was too short to reach the blade without it. As the board tilted and she looked down into the bucket, she cried out her final words. "Father, into your hands I lay my soul." 3 minutes. Cell to blade. The face of an angel. The heart of something else entirely. And Greta Byer wouldn't be the last young woman to die for a man she claimed to love. Case 2. Leonarda Cianciulli. She boiled the bodies. Then she baked the cakes, and she served them to her neighbors with tea. 1939. Correggio, Italy. Before the war consumed Europe, a different kind of horror was unfolding in a quiet Italian town. And by the time anyone discovered it, the evidence had already been eaten. Leonarda Cianciulli was a mother of 4. Her neighbors called her gentle. Her friends called her kind. But Leonarda carried a curse, or so she believed. A fortune teller once told her all her children would die. Of 17 pregnancies, where 13 ended in death, she would do anything to protect the 4 who survived. When her eldest son Giuseppe was called to join the Italian army, Leonarda snapped. She became convinced that only human sacrifice could keep him alive. She chose 3 friends. First was Faustina Setti, a lonely 73-year-old spinster. Leonarda told her she had found a husband waiting in another city. On the day Faustina came to say goodbye, Leonarda handed her a glass of drugged wine. Then she picked up an axe. When she cut the body into 9 pieces, she dissolved the remains in caustic soda. The blood she dried, ground into powder and mixed with flour, sugar, chocolate, and eggs. She baked tea cakes. Francesca Soavi was next. Same method, same axe, same cakes. The third victim was Virginia Cacioppo, a 53-year-old former opera soprano who had once performed at La Scala. After killing her, Leonarda noted that Virginia's flesh was fat and white. She boiled it with cologne and turned it into bars of soap, and which she gave to neighbors. Virginia's sister-in-law saw her walk into Leonarda's house, but never walk out. She reported the disappearance. When police arrived, Leonarda confessed immediately and proudly. At trial in 1946, she interrupted the prosecutor to correct technical details about her process. She showed no remorse. She received 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum, where she died of a stroke in 1970. And the pot she used to boil her victims is still on display at the Criminological Museum in Rome. But the soapmaker's madness was driven by love. The next woman's poison was driven by something far colder. Case 3, Maryanne Cotton. The rope tightened, but her neck did not break. For 3 agonizing minutes, she twisted and choked as the crowd watched in silence. March 24th, 1873. Durham, England. By the time Maryanne Cotton stood on the scaffold, she had buried as many as 21 people. Would you husbands, children, stepchildren, a mother, a lover. Nearly all of them died the same way, with stomach pains that doctors called gastric fever. Nearly all of them were insured. Maryanne Robson was born in 1832 in County Durham. Her father fell 150 feet down a mine shaft when she was 8. She married young. She moved often, and everywhere she went, people died. Her first husband, William Mowbray, gave her 5 children. 4 died. Then William died, and she collected 35 pounds, half a year's wages. She married George Ward. He died. She married James Robinson. His baby died. Her own mother died 9 days after a visit. 3 more children died within 2 weeks of each other. Robinson discovered she had stolen 50 pounds and thrown her out. She married Frederick Cotton, bigamously. His sister died. Frederick died. His children died. Her lover Joseph Nattrass moved in, revised his will in her favor, and then died too. And it was a comment to Thomas Riley, a parish official, that finally unraveled everything. Maryanne wanted her last surviving stepson, 7-year-old Charles Edward Cotton, sent to the workhouse because he was in the way. She told Riley, "I won't be troubled long. He'll go like all the rest of the Cottons." 5 days later, the boy was dead. Riley went to the police. A post-mortem found arsenic in the child's stomach. Exhumations of other bodies confirmed the same poison, and her trial offered a single defense: the green wallpaper theory, claiming arsenic in the home's wallpaper dye killed the boy. The jury rejected it in 90 minutes. On execution day, hangman William Calcraft misjudged the drop. Maryanne did not die from a snapped neck. She was slowly strangled by the noose, her body convulsing for over 3 minutes. Children in the north of England would sing the rhyme for generations. Maryanne Cotton, she's dead and she's rotten. She killed for insurance money, moved between pit villages like a ghost, and did it all 2 decades before anyone had heard of Jack the Ripper. And if Maryanne Cotton weaponized arsenic in England, the next woman perfected it in America. with bread and butter sandwiches. Case 4. Anna Cunningham. She fed poison to her own children on bread and butter. Then she collected the insurance checks one by one. 1918 to 1922. Bockley Corners, Indiana. Anna Cunningham had a sweet, motherly face and gray hair. Her neighbors in rural Indiana called her a little eccentric. She read her Bible behind locked doors for hours. But nobody suspected that behind that door, she was planning how to bury her family. Her husband David died first, in July 1918, writhing from stomach pains on the family farm. Anna collected $1,000 in insurance. Then she sold the farm for $4,000 more and moved the family to Gary, and her daughter Isabel was next. Anna insured her for $1,000 just 5 weeks before her death on New Year's Eve, 1919. She paid only one premium before collecting. Her son Charles died in September 1921. Her son Harry followed 3 weeks later, insured for $2,500. Then 13-year-old Walter, insured for $180. Dead by September 1922. The pattern should have been obvious. 4 family members dead within 4 years, and each insured shortly before dying. But no one connected the deaths until April 1925, when Anna's surviving son, David Jr., collapsed and was rushed to a Chicago hospital. Dr. Thomas Carver tested his blood. The diagnosis was arsenical poisoning. A cousin named George Arnold told authorities the family had been living almost entirely on insurance payouts from the 5 deceased members. Police searched the Cunningham home and found large quantities of poison. Anna said it was for spraying plants. Under interrogation, Anna signed a confession. She admitted to feeding arsenic to her children on bread and butter sandwiches. She said she killed them because she loved them, so they could join in heaven with their father. Then she collapsed into a coma that lasted hours. At trial, she recanted. The jury deliberated for over 24 hours before finding her guilty of Walter's murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. She could not afford an appeal. In the local press compared her to the Borgias. But behind that sweet face was something no Renaissance poisoner could match. A mother who murdered her own. In the 1800s, public executions drew thousands. People packed hillsides to watch women die. The next case proves just how enormous and how unjust those spectacles could be. Case 5, Susanna Cox. The horses pulled the wagon forward. She dropped. For 17 minutes, her body thrashed and bucked on the end of the rope, while 20,000 people watched. June 10, 1809. Reading, Pennsylvania. Susanna Cox was 24 years old. She had a pretty face, a vigorous frame, and an education so poor she could barely speak English. Only the German dialect of her Pennsylvania Dutch community. Her father had sold her into indentured servitude at 13 to pay off debts. She spent 11 years scrubbing floors for other people's families. When Susanna became pregnant in secret, she knew what it meant. Losing her position, being turned out, shame. On February 14th, 1809, at 4:30 in the morning, she gave birth alone in a stone mansion. What happened next would cost her everything. 3 days later, her employer, Jacob Gear, found a frozen bundle wrapped in an old coat beneath a washhouse floor. Inside was the body of Susanna's infant son. A doctor discovered the baby's jaw had been broken, the tongue torn loose, and a wad of fabric forced down its throat. Susanna was arrested and taken to Reading Prison. Her trial lasted 1 day. She insisted the child was stillborn. The jury deliberated 4 hours and found her guilty of first-degree murder. A petition for clemency was sent to the governor. It was denied. On execution morning, local women sewed Susanna a new white dress trimmed with wide black ribbons and a frilly white cap. She stood on her own coffin atop a horse-drawn wagon. When the horses moved, she dropped. The fall did not break her neck. For 17 agonizing minutes, Susanna Cox thrashed at the end of the rope as up to 20,000 spectators watched from Gallows Hill. The town's population was only 4,000. Afterward, doctors on the scene reportedly attempted to revive her, believing that if she could be brought back, she had paid her legal price. They failed. The hangman was beaten and chased out of town by the crowd. The judge resigned within a month. Here, her bones were rediscovered in 1905 during road construction near a reservoir. But Susanna Cox's 17 minutes on the rope were not the longest anyone would suffer. The next woman's execution would go wrong in a different way entirely. Case 6, Charlotte Corday. The blade came down. Then a man picked up her severed head and slapped her across the face. Witnesses said her expression changed to one of unmistakable fury. July 17th, 1793. Paris, France, where the French Revolution was devouring its own, and a 24-year-old woman from Normandy decided she could stop the bloodshed with a single kitchen knife. Marie-Anne Charlotte Corday d'Armont was the descendant of the great dramatist Pierre Corneille. Raised in a convent after losing her mother and sister, she read Plutarch and Voltaire by candlelight. She sympathized with the Girondins, the moderate faction, and watched in horror as the radical Jacobins called for more and more heads. She blamed one man above all, Jean-Paul Marat, a journalist and politician who wielded terrifying power through his newspaper. Marat called for mass executions. Charlotte believed that killing him would save 100,000 lives. On July 9th, 1793, she left Caen carrying a copy of Plutarch's Parallel Lives. In Paris, she purchased a kitchen knife with a 6-inch blade. She wrote a manifesto explaining her reasons. Then she went to find Marat. He was in his bathtub. Just a chronic skin disease kept him there almost permanently. Charlotte gained entry by claiming she had intelligence about a Girondist uprising. As she dictated names and he wrote them down, she pulled the knife from her scarf and drove it into his chest. It pierced his lung, aorta, and left ventricle. Marat cried out, "Help me, my dear friend," and died. Charlotte was arrested on the spot. Her trial was swift. When she told the tribunal, "I killed one man to save 100,000. Her defense attorney admitted the crime, allowed no defense. On execution day, a violent thunderstorm broke over Paris, but the crowds stayed. Charlotte refused to sit in the cart, standing for the entire ride over jolting cobblestones. She wore the red chemise required of traitors. She asked to keep her gloves on because her captors had bound her wrists so tightly her skin was raw. The executioner agreed. After the guillotine fell, an assistant named Legros lifted her head from the basket and slapped her cheek. Witnesses swore her face twisted into an expression of rage. Legros was imprisoned for 3 months for violating guillotine etiquette. Charlotte Corday was buried in a trench, beside King Louis XVI. Her skull, according to rumor, remained in the Bonaparte family for over a century. She killed for politics. The next woman killed for something much more personal, and the evidence would take centuries to uncover. Case 7, Beatrice Cenci. The sword came down on a September morning. She was 22, and the crowd wept for her. That because they believed she had killed a monster. September 11th, 1599, Rome, Italy. In the centuries that followed, Beatrice Cenci became a legend. The beautiful murderer, the fallen angel, the subject of paintings, poems, plays, and a ghost story that persists in Rome to this day. Beatrice was born into the Roman aristocracy in 1577. Her father, Count Francesco Cenci, he was a man of extreme violence. He had been jailed multiple times but freed because of his noble status. Historical accounts allege years of sustained abuse directed at Beatrice. When she reported him to the authorities, no action was taken. Francesco responded by exiling Beatrice and her stepmother Lucrezia to a remote fortress in the mountains. Trapped and desperate, the family plotted. On September 9th, 1598, while Francesco slept, drugged but apparently waking during the attack, hired men drove an iron spike into his skull with a hammer. They threw his body off a balcony to fake an accident, but investigators noticed the gap in the railing was too small for a man of his size. The plot unraveled. Beatrice, Lucrezia, and her brother Giacomo were arrested. Despite a defense arguing she acted out of desperation against an abusive father, Pope Clement VIII refused mercy. A recent case of patricide had made him fear a wave of family murders. On execution morning, Giacomo was tortured in a cart on the way to the scaffold, his body later quartered with a mallet. Lucrezia was beheaded with a sword. Then it was Beatrice's turn. 12-year-old Bernardo, the youngest sibling, was forced to watch every execution before being returned to prison. Beatrice walked to the scaffold with what witnesses described as fixed and pale composure, and simplicity and dignity. A late summer morning in Rome, a crowd that loved her, a blade that did not care. Legend says her ghost returns every year to the San Angelo Bridge, carrying her own severed head. But Beatrice's story is one of tragedy. The next story is one of pure, calculated evil, tested on hospital patients before being unleashed on family. Case 8, Marquise de Brinvilliers. She was beheaded. Then her body was burned at the stake. Then her ashes were scattered to the wind. Even in death, they wanted to make sure she was gone. July 17th, 1676. Paris, France. Marie-Madeleine Marguerite d'Aubray, the Marquise de Brinvilliers, had a fascinating air of childlike innocence. She was pretty, wealthy, and much courted. She was also responsible for approximately 50 practice murders before she killed her own family. Born in 1630, the Marquise married into wealth. In 1659, she began an affair with a cavalry officer named Sainte Croix. Her father, a powerful civil lieutenant, was so enraged he had the lover imprisoned in the Bastille for a year. Inside those walls, Sainte Croix learned the art of poisoning from an Italian cellmate. When he was released, the Marquise and Sainte Croix began planning revenge. But first, she needed to test the poison. For 2 years, she visited hospitals disguised as a charity worker, distributing food laced with tofana poison, a clear, tasteless liquid to approximately 50 sick and poor patients. She observed their symptoms and calibrated the dosage. In February 1666, she poisoned her father. He died shortly after. In 1670, she poisoned both her brothers. The family fortune was hers. The scheme collapsed in 1672 when Sainte Croix died and police found a leather box containing incriminating letters and bottles of poison. The Marquise fled to England, then Germany, and then a convent in Belgium. A detective disguised as a priest lured her out. Among her possessions at arrest, a full written confession of every crime she had ever committed. Before her execution, she was subjected to the water cure, forced to drink 16 pints of water. Then she was beheaded, her body burned, and her ashes scattered. The case launched the infamous affair of the poisons, a period of mass hysteria that reached the inner circle of the King of France. She kept a diary of her own murders. She practiced on the poor, and she smiled through all of it. We're deep into this one. Before we continue, Antisag, I want to try something different today. These women were executed across 3 centuries and 4 continents. Drop a comment right now telling me where you are watching from and which execution so far has disturbed you the most. I want to see how far this video reaches. Are you watching from London, where Brownrigg was hanged? From Paris, where the guillotine fell on Charlotte Corday? From a town that once held public executions of its own? Tell me. I'm reading every single comment. Case 9. Phoebe Campbell. The trapdoor opened. She fell, and her lace handkerchief stayed clutched in her fingers for a full minute after she stopped breathing. June 20th, 1872. London, Ontario, Canada. Phoebe Campbell was 25 years old, a farmer's wife, and a mother of 2. On the night of July 14th, 1871, which she claimed 2 men with blackened faces broke into their log cabin and beat her husband George to death with an axe. The story should have held. But Phoebe made mistakes. A neighbor saw her talking to Thomas Coyle, her husband's father's hired man, in a field the very next day. Her sister-in-law noticed she did cry a little once, but seemed far less distressed than she should have been. 6 local men were arrested based on Phoebe's testimony. But the evidence pointed somewhere else entirely. 7 days after the murder, Phoebe herself was arrested. The cabin had been covered in gore, with blood on every surface. George's head was beaten beyond recognition. The coroner's inquest determined 2 people had wielded the axe. At trial in London, Ontario, the Crown produced a letter Phoebe had written to Coyle. "I never shall say you done any such thing again, if I have to die for it." When confronted with contradictions, Phoebe blamed her cousin. Then she invoked the supernatural, claiming George's ghost appeared and declared her innocent. The Crown attorney responded, "You can hardly expect anyone to believe such nonsense." The jury convicted her in 1 hour. In prison, she wrote an 8-page confession revealing the full conspiracy. She and Coyle planned to kill George so they could marry. On the scaffold, Phoebe held a lace handkerchief. Her final written words, "It is a solemn thing to die if not prepared." The trapdoor opened. She became the first woman executed in post-Confederation Canada and the only woman ever executed in Middlesex County. Souvenir postcards of the crime were printed and sold to the public. But Phoebe chose her accomplice. The next woman had no choice at all. Case 10. Lena Baker. The electric chair was called Old Sparky. It took 6 minutes and several jolts before they pronounced her dead. 60 years later, the state admitted it was a mistake. March 5th, 1945. Reidsville, Georgia. Lena Baker was born in 1901 in a former slave cabin 5 miles from Cuthbert, Georgia. She was a black sharecropper's daughter who chopped cotton, cleaned houses, and sang in the church choir. She had 3 children and no money. In 1941, a white gristmill owner named Ernest Knight hired her to care for him after he broke his leg. What began as employment became imprisonment. Knight, 67 years old and a known abuser, he kept Baker as what investigators later described as a virtual sex slave. He locked her inside his grist mill for days. He provided alcohol in exchange for sex. When she tried to leave, his son Eugene beat her so severely she barely survived. The local sheriff warned Baker, not Knight, that she would go to jail if the relationship continued. On April 29, 1944, Knight forced Baker to go with him. She escaped into the woods and slept near a convict camp. The next morning, Knight found her again and locked her inside the sweltering mill. When she told him she was leaving, he picked up an iron bar and said he would kill her first. In the struggle, Baker grabbed Knight's pistol, a gun he kept strapped to his chest. It discharged. The bullet struck Knight in the head. He died instantly. Baker walked to the coroner's house and said, "I have shot Mr. Knight." She was cooperative. She never ran. Her trial lasted 1 day. The judge, William Two-Gun Worrell, he kept 2 pistols on his bench. The jury of 12 white men, many of them friends who socialized together, deliberated between 20 and 30 minutes. No witnesses were called for Baker's defense. Her mother wrote to the governor, "I is praying night and day on my knees to God that he will soften your heart, if you will only save my child." The governor declined. At Reidsville State Prison, Baker was housed in the men's section because there was no facility for female death row inmates. And on execution morning, she said, "What I done, I did in self-defense. I would have been killed myself." The local paper ran a 2-word headline, "Baker Burns." On August 16, 2005, 60 years later, the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles granted Lena Baker a full and unconditional pardon, calling the original refusal of clemency a grievous error. Her grave went unmarked until 1998, when her church congregation raised $250 for a headstone. Justice arrived, but it arrived 6 decades too late. Case 11, Mary Bateman. They hanged her at 5 in the morning. Then they charged the public 3 pence to view the body. They sold strips of her tanned skin as good luck charms. March 20th, 1809, York, England. Mary Bateman. The Yorkshire witch had been a thief, a con artist, and a self-proclaimed sorceress since the age of 5. By adulthood, she had perfected a scheme so elaborate it would have been laughable if it hadn't ended in death. Born in 1768, Mary was sacked from so many domestic positions that she turned to fortune-telling. She married a wheelwright after a 3-week courtship. He later claimed she had hexed him into it. She collected donations for fire victims and kept the money. She produced miraculous eggs inscribed with "Christ is coming," later discovered to have been etched with acid and reinserted into the hen. Her masterpiece was the murder of Rebecca Perigo. In 1806, the Perigos, a gullible married couple, came to Mary believing a neighbor had cursed them. Mary invented an imaginary oracle named Mrs. Blythe, who supposedly lived in Scarborough and communicated through letters. Every letter was written in Mary's own handwriting, mailed to Scarborough, then mailed back to create the illusion of distance. Under Mrs. Blythe's instructions, the Perigos surrendered money, sewed banknotes into their bed, and eventually agreed to eat a special pudding for several days. The pudding was laced with mercuric chloride. The antidote Mary provided contained arsenic. William Perigot ate only half. His lips turned black, but he survived. Rebecca forced herself to eat everything, terrified of the spell. She died in agony on May 24th. For 2 more years, William continued to be duped until he finally opened the silk bags sewn into his bed and found only scraps of waste paper. At trial, Mary denied everything. When sentenced to death, she claimed she was 22 weeks pregnant. A jury of 12 women examined her and declared the claim false. Even in prison, she swindled fellow inmates, taking their money in exchange for promises of reprieves. At her execution, many in the crowd believed she would use her powers to vanish when the noose tightened. She did not. Her skeleton still stands in the Thackeray Medical Museum in Leeds. Case 12. Marie Alexandrine Becker. She poisoned her victims over cups of tea in the back of her dress shop. Then she danced in nightclubs until dawn. 1932 to 1936. Liège, Belgium. For most of her life, Marie Alexandrine Becker was a bored housewife married to a cabinet maker. Then at age 53, a man propositioned her at a vegetable stand, and something inside her ignited. The affair with Lambert Byer awakened what investigators would later describe as an insatiable appetite for pleasure. But her husband was in the way. She poisoned him with digitalis, a heart medication derived from foxglove, and collected his life insurance. She opened a dress shop. She began frequenting nightclubs, dancing wildly, and paying younger men for companionship. When her lover Byer became a burden, she poisoned him too. Then she discovered a more efficient system. In the back of her shop, she would serve tea to elderly female customers while discussing the latest fashions. The tea was laced with digitalis. Once her victims became ill, she robbed them of cash and jewelry, then sent them home to die. She attended their funerals, weeping hysterically at gravesides. Between 1932 and 1936, she killed at least 10 people. Some estimates suggest 20. The scheme ended when she offered to help a friend poison her husband. "If you really mean that," Marie said, "I can supply you with a powder that will leave no trace." The friend went to the police. At trial, Marie described her victims with chilling detachment. One woman, she said, was dying beautifully, lying flat on her back. Another looked like an angel choked with sauerkraut. She was sentenced to life in prison. Belgium had effectively abolished the death penalty by converting all death sentences to life terms. Marie Becker died behind bars in 1938. Here is a fact worth pausing on. In the 1800s, public executions were considered entertainment. Vendors sold pies and ale while crowds watched women hang. If public executions still existed in your city today, would you go and watch? Case 13. Elizabeth Branch and Mary Branch. They moved the execution to 4 in the morning. If they hadn't, the mob would have torn the women apart with their bare hands. May 3rd, 1740. Taunton, England. Elizabeth Branch was 67 years old. Her daughter Mary was 24. Together, they destroyed a 13-year-old girl named Jane Buttersworth, and the way they did it would horrify even by modern standards. Elizabeth had a reputation. Her husband, a wealthy farmer known for his kindness, used to secretly pay the servants their wages after Elizabeth denied them food and locked them out at night. When he died, every servant in the household quit immediately. Elizabeth's cruelty was so well known that no local family would send their daughters to work for her. She was forced to hire orphans placed by the parish. Jane Buttersworth was one of those orphans, 13 years old, from Bristol, described as rather slow-minded. She was sent to buy yeast and returned late. What followed lasted hours. Mary struck Jane in the head and pinched her ears. Both women threw her to the ground. Mary knelt on the girl's neck while Elizabeth whipped her with twigs until blood ran across the floor. They beat her with a shoe, then broomsticks, until she fell unconscious. They threw water on her. They stripped her naked and poured salt into her wounds. When the dairymaid returned half an hour later, she found Jane lying dead on the floor in a pool of blood. Elizabeth sat calmly by the fire. A clean cap had been placed on Jane's head, but the blood had already soaked through. That night, the Branches ordered the dairymaid to sleep in the same bed as the corpse. Later, they dragged the body to a field for a secret burial. Neighbors reported a strange light hovering over the grave. The dairymaid escaped and reported everything. A surgeon who examined the exhumed body found wounds so severe that almost any one of which would have proved mortal. At trial, Elizabeth tried to bribe the jury. When that failed, she kicked a prosecution witness during testimony. When Mary fainted at their sentencing, Elizabeth shouted, "Zounds, what are you going to do? Hadn't she better die like this than be hanged?" On execution morning, authorities arrived at 4 a.m. to find the gallows had been destroyed by the mob. A carpenter rebuilt it. Elizabeth reportedly offered to hang from a nearby tree, joking about her last name, Branch. She helped the hangman position the noose around her daughter's neck and asked for a drink of liquor, which was refused. Mary wept. Elizabeth did not. The next execution would be equally grim, but far more public. In Case 14, Elizabeth Brownrigg. She was a respected midwife, a mother of 16, and she tortured parish girls in her kitchen with whips, chains, and scissors. September 14th, 1767, London, England. The crowd at Tyburn did something unusual that day. They did not hurl insults at the hangman. For once, they agreed with his work. Elizabeth Brownrigg was born in 1720 and married a plumber named James. She gave birth to 16 children and only 3 survived. She became a midwife so respected that St. Dunstan's parish appointed her overseer of women and children. Then she began taking on apprentice girls from orphanages. The torture of Mary Clifford, a 14-year-old foundling, would become one of the most infamous cases in English criminal history. Brownrigg stripped her naked, chained her to beams and water pipes, and hung her by her arms from a staple in the ceiling. She whipped her until blood flowed across the kitchen floor, and she used scissors to cut the girl's tongue. She beat her with an iron bar. She forced her to sleep naked in a freezing coal hole, fed only bread and water. When investigators finally found Mary Clifford locked in a cupboard, her body was described as one continual ulcer, ready to mortify. Her face was so swollen she could not close her mouth. She died in the hospital days later. Elizabeth fled with her son to Wandsworth, where an innkeeper recognized them from newspaper descriptions and turned them in. The trial at the Old Bailey lasted 11 hours. Her husband and son blamed everything on Elizabeth. They received 6 months and a 1 shilling fine. Elizabeth was sentenced to death. On the cart ride to Tyburn, the crowd's hatred was absolute. After her body was cut down, it was taken for medical dissection. The case forced the Foundling Hospital to institute greater protections for apprentice children. But it came too late for Mary Clifford. Case 15, Styllou Christofi. At exactly 9 a.m., the trapdoor opened. She weighed 117 pounds. They gave her a drop of 8 feet 4 inches. The last thing she saw was a Maltese cross on the wall. December 15th, 1954. Holloway Prison, London. Styllou Pantopio. Christofi was a 53-year-old Greek Cypriot grandmother who could not read, could not write, and could not speak English. In 1925, she had been tried in Cyprus for ramming a burning torch down her mother-in-law's throat. She was acquitted. Nearly 30 years later, she moved to London to live with her son Stavros, whom she had not seen in 12 years, and his German-born wife, Hella. The friction was immediate. Styllou disapproved of everything. How Hella raised the children, how she managed the home, how she existed. When Hella gave Stavros an ultimatum, and your mother goes or I do, Styllou made her own decision. If someone had to go, it would be Hella. On the night of July 28th, 1954, while Stavros worked his shift as a waiter and 3 young grandchildren slept upstairs, Styllou struck Hella over the head with a heavy metal ash plate from the kitchen stove. She strangled her with a scarf. She dragged the body into the garden, wrapped it in paraffin-soaked newspaper, and set it on fire. A neighbor walking his dog saw what he thought was a tailor's dummy burning in the yard. Then he watched Styllou stoke the flames. He took no further action. An hour later, Styllou ran into the street and threw herself in front of a passing car. "Please come," she shouted. "Fire burning, children sleeping." Police found a red mark around Hella's neck that had survived the fire. They found her wedding ring hidden in Styllou's bedroom. At trial, her son begged her to plead insanity. She refused. "I am a poor woman of no education, but I'm not a mad woman." The jury convicted her in under 2 hours. Executioner Albert Pierre Point noted that Styllou received almost no public sympathy. Unlike Ruth Ellis, who would be the next woman hanged at Holloway, Styllou was a gray-haired grandmother. Ellis was a blonde nightclub hostess. The rope did not discriminate, but public attention did. The Maltese cross she requested remained on the execution chamber wall until the room was dismantled in 1967. Case 16, Madame Basarabo. She shot him. She stuffed him in a trunk. She shipped the trunk across France by rail. 1920. Paris, France. Marie-Louise Victorine Groes, known to the literary world as Hera Myrtel and to the courts as Madame Basarabo, was a silk merchant's daughter who wrote romantic poetry, hosted a literary salon, and left a trail of dead men across 2 continents. Her first husband, Paul Jacques, was found dead of a gunshot wound in 1914, officially ruled a suicide. But a maid had previously warned him. "I hope you like the flavoring that Madame put into your soup," a reference to the white powder Marie had slipped into his dinner. A chemist confirmed the substance was lethal poison. Her second husband, Charles Basarabo, fared no better. He once woke to find Marie on top of him, choking him. After he threw her off, she wept and said, "I don't know what came over me." Months before his death, she fired a pistol at him during an argument, used the bullet whistling over his head. She then calmly sat down and ate dinner. On July 31st, 1920, she shot Basarabo to death. With the help of her daughter Pauline, she placed his naked, beaten body in a large trunk and shipped it by rail to the city of Nancy. When police tracked down the trunk, Marie confessed. But at trial in February 1921, her daughter Pauline leapt to her feet and screamed, "I must and will tell the truth." Marie shouted at her to shut up. Pauline laid the full blame on her mother. Pauline was acquitted. Marie was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. She died in prison in 1930, a hashish-addicted poet who shipped a corpse across France in a trunk. Even fiction would struggle to imagine it. Case 17. Ruth Blay. A messenger arrived on a foaming horse, carrying a pardon from the governor. But Ruth Blay was already dead. The sheriff had refused to wait because he did not want to be late for his dinner, December 30th, 1768, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. By the time the rope went tight, Ruth Blay had become the last woman ever executed in the state of New Hampshire. She was 31 years old. Her crime was not murder. Ruth was a school teacher, well educated for her era, traveling between towns to teach in private homes. When she became pregnant out of wedlock, she hid it. She let out her dresses from the back. She told no one the father's name. She took that to the grave. On her 31st birthday, Ruth gave birth alone in a barn at night. The child was stillborn. Terrified and desperate, she hid the tiny body beneath the floorboards. 3 days later, men arrived and found the infant. Under English law at the time, concealing the death of an illegitimate child, whether born alive or dead, was a capital crime. An all-male jury convicted her. She was sentenced to hang. She spent 5 months in chains. She received 3 separate reprieves from the governor, wherein the final one set a new execution date, December 30th. Ruth spent her last night writing a statement of innocence in the presence of 3 witnesses. On execution morning, she was placed in a horse-drawn carriage with her wooden coffin beside her. Dressed in silks and satins, looking like a bride to death, she was driven through the streets while her shrieks filled the air. Thousands gathered at the Old South Cemetery, including children, and Sheriff Thomas Packer ordered the execution, despite the crowd's claims that another reprieve was on its way. He said, "Draw away the cart, my boys." Minutes after Ruth died, a messenger arrived on a foaming horse with the governor's pardon. That night, enraged citizens hung Sheriff Packer in effigy. The placard read, "Am I to lose my dinner, this woman for to hang? Come draw away the cart, my boys. Don't stop to say amen." The execution took place on a chilly and frosty day with a clear view to the open sea. Ruth Blay's grave remains unmarked, roughly 300 feet north of a pond, in what is now the proprietor's burial ground. She was the first person buried in that soil, a stillborn child, a woman executed for concealment, a pardon that arrived minutes too late. Some executions are not about justice. They are about power. Case 18. Mary Frances Kraton. They had to carry her to the electric chair. She was unconscious. and she weighed barely more than the children she left behind. July 16th, 1936. Sing Sing Prison, New York. Mary Frances Kraton was called the Black-Eyed Borgia, and the name was earned. By the time she sat in the electric chair at age 37, she had poisoned at least 4 people across 2 states and been acquitted twice before the law finally caught her. In 1923, her 18-year-old brother Raymond Avery died, and Mary, his guardian and the beneficiary of his insurance, was charged with arsenic poisoning. She was acquitted because no one saw her administer it. Days later, she was charged with poisoning her mother-in-law, acquitted again. The Kratons moved to Long Island to escape their reputation. They befriended the Applegates. When the Depression hit, the Applegate family moved in. Then Everett Applegate began an inappropriate relationship with Mary's 15-year-old daughter, Ruth. And Mary decided to remove the only obstacle, Ada Applegate, Everett's wife and Mary's supposed best friend. For a week, she laced Ada's eggnogs with Rough-On Rats, a commercial rodent poison. Ada died on September 27, 1935. Her body contained enough arsenic to kill 3 people. At trial, the district attorney asked Mary, "You stood by and watched this woman who was your best friend die?" Mary answered simply, "Yes." Her daughter Ruth testified against her, and the jury convicted both Mary and Everett. In prison, Mary's mind shattered. She stopped eating everything except ice cream. She woke screaming, "I can't stand it." She claimed her legs were paralyzed. A medical commission declared her a malingerer. Her last visit was with Ruth. She told her daughter, "Take care of your daddy." On execution night, Mary was unconscious and had to be carried to the chair. She wore a pink nightgown, a black kimono, and held a rosary. The back of her head was shaved. A warder suffered severe burns releasing her body because her silk clothing provided none of the usual insulation. During her time on death row, 10 men were executed. She heard every one. Case 19, Fouchiat, Virginia Christian, 3 jolts of electricity, electrodes strapped to her forearms instead of her head. She was 17 years old. She had been 17 for exactly 1 day. August 16th, 1912. Richmond, Virginia. Virginia Christian turned 17 in a prison cell. The next morning, she was strapped into an electric chair that had been built only 4 years earlier. Virginia, called Jenny by her family, was a young black woman in Jim Crow, Virginia. Her mother was paralyzed and could not care for her. Virginia worked as a maid for Ida Virginia Belote, a frail widow who weighed 91 pounds. On March 18, 1912, Belote accused Virginia of stealing a gold locket. She threatened jail. A physical confrontation began. Belote struck Virginia with a ceramic spittoon. Both women scrambled for broomstick handles used to prop up windows. Virginia reached one first. In the struggle that followed, Virginia struck Belote and then, panicking as the woman screamed, forced a towel down her throat to silence her. She took a small purse and a ring before leaving. Police found Belote's body the same day. Virginia was arrested and confessed. She said she was shocked that Belote was dead and had no intention of killing her. Her trial came less than 2 weeks later, and while public anger was still at fever pitch, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Her attorneys, fearing that even an acquittal would provoke a lynch mob, chose not to put her on the stand. Virginia's mother dictated a letter to the governor. I is praying night and day on my knees to God that he will soften your heart. If you will only save my child who is little over 16 years old, God will bless you forever. The governor called it the most dastardly crime in state history and declined. During the execution, electrodes were improperly placed on her forearms, rather than in the standard position. A reporter noted that each time the electric switch was touched, the body of the woman responded with fearful convulsions. 3 shocks were administered, but her family could not afford to transport the body home. It was turned over to the state medical school. A teenager, a stolen locket, a broken system that offered no mercy. Case 20. Heather Arnold. The detectives dressed as garbage collectors. When she handed them a white carrier bag, they found the charred pieces of an axe handle inside. April 30th, 1986. Westbury, Wiltshire, England. Heather Arnold was a 50-year-old mathematics teacher at Kingsdown Comprehensive School, and her marriage had recently fallen apart. The Sutcliffe family, Paul, a fellow math teacher, and his wife Jean, tried to help her through the emotional crisis. Heather repaid their kindness with an axe. On April 30th, 1986, Heather went to the Sutcliffe home. She attacked 39-year-old Jean and their 8-month-old daughter Heidi. Paul Sutcliffe returned from work that afternoon and discovered both bodies. Heather was arrested the same day. She initially confessed and then retracted her statement after consulting her lawyer. But the police had anticipated her next move. A team of 4 undercover detectives posed as garbage collectors. When they arrived at Arnold's house for the trash, she handed them a white carrier bag. Inside were 3 charred pieces of an axe handle. The axe head was found separately in her possession. Forensic examiners matched flakes of red paint from the axe to paint found on Jean's body and inside Arnold's car. At trial in 1987, Arnold claimed she found the axe in her garage and felt an inexplicable need to destroy it. She maintained she knew nothing about the murders. The jury convicted her unanimously after 7 hours. She later admitted to psychiatrists the truth. She killed Jean because she wanted to be closer to Paul Sutcliffe. She hated Jean. Arnold was sentenced to life. She was eventually committed to Broadmoor Hospital. In an appeal in 1996 based on diminished responsibility was rejected. The court ruled that an intelligent woman who chose a not guilty defense at trial could not later claim mental incapacity after the strategy failed. The axe, the garbage collectors, the obsession hidden behind a professional exterior. Some of the most dangerous people look exactly like everyone else. Case 21. Anna Antonio. She had already died 1,000 times before they turned on the current. The chair was built for men, and she looked like a child sitting in it. August 9th, 1934. Sing Sing Prison, New York. Anna Antonio was 28 years old, weighed 85 pounds, and had spent 16 months on death row, listening to 10 men be executed before it was her turn. She had been reprieved 3 times. Each time she believed she was saved. Each time the date was simply moved. Anna married Salvatore Antonio at 16. For 12 years, she endured what she described as an abusive, violent marriage. On March 27th, 1932, Salvatore was lured to a highway outside Albany by 2 men, Sam Faraci and Vincent Saetta. He was shot 5 times and stabbed 15 times. His body was left on the road. Police arrested all 3. The prosecution claimed Anna hired Pharisee and Seta for $800 from Salvatore's $5,300 insurance payout. Anna maintained her innocence throughout a 26-day trial. All three were convicted and sentenced to death. At Sing Sing, the three local women were hired as matrons for Anna. No female death row prisoners had been housed there before. They became her friends and later shielded her body from photographers. On the night of June 28, 1934, 10 minutes before the scheduled execution, Seta suddenly confessed to the warden. He said Anna was innocent. He had killed Salvatore over a $75 debt. The execution was stayed. Anna collapsed. The governor granted a 24-hour reprieve, and then a 10-day reprieve, then a 1-month reprieve. Each time, Anna's hopes rose. Each time, the courts denied a new trial. The district attorney called Saeda's confession an absolute fabrication of lies. On August 9th, her daughter Marie's 10th birthday, Anna fell into a semi-coma. Her head was shaved a second time. Guards arrived at 11 p.m. She wore a tight blue dress with white trim that she had sewn herself. Because of her small frame, its matrons had to slide the fabric up to fit her legs into the ankle stocks. One leg was bare for the electrode. She wore a single dark stocking on the other. Her chin rested on her chest. At 11:12 p.m., the current sputtered and crackled. At 11:16, she was pronounced dead. As Pharisee was led to the same chair minutes later, he passed attendants carrying Anna's body through the doorway. He was smiling. He was still smoking a cigar. And Anna Antonio told anyone who would listen, "I have already died enough for 1,000,000 men." The electric chair did not care if she was telling the truth. They walked to gallows in silk dresses. They sat in electric chairs built for men. They whispered final prayers that echoed off stone walls no one was listening behind. History recorded their crimes, but history almost forgot their names. Almost. If this video made you think, share it. If it made you question the justice system, subscribe. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones we were never told. This has been Crime Lens. We'll see you in the next one.